Hello everybody, this is Blue, and as much as I hate him, I guess I better do the old trigger warning safe spaces view. This video is going to be talking about a lot of dark subjects, and so if you are fragile and can't handle reality, you might want to run away now. Alright, that's done. I am not a big supporter of this safe spaces stuff in RPGs. RPGs are brutal, especially in your fantasy realm. It seems that a lot of people forget that that was then. The morals and the understandings of life were different then than they are compared now. We cannot take our modern presentism and throw those standards on the way it was, 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. That doesn't work. Okay? Now, if you're a game designer, especially if you're just starting out on your game, you need to decide what is in your game and what isn't. What's allowed and what's forbidden. I have been role-playing since the late 1980s, so I have over 30 years experience in role-playing. And with this, designing my game right now, because I decided to stop doing Rolemaster and completely create my own game instead of calling it a Rolemaster homebrew. Okay? I decided that there were too many times over the years where I needed a deadly skill to be used in certain situations. An example of this would be an assassin. So my assassin is going into a castle. He needs to kill somebody quietly, but he could not bring any metal weapons with him. So he has a piece of rope that got through. Alright, so he's able to infiltrate. He got close to his target, and all he has to do is put the rope around his neck and strangle his target to achieve his goal. So I've had that situation occur a couple of times where I did not have that skill, that attack table. And so I added it. Alright? Because that's how people were killed back then, and still to this day, people are strangled. So I have a strangle, critical and attack table. But there's more. The Middle Ages, fantasy is filled with times of torture. And so, the rack. We've all heard about the rack. We've seen the movies countless times, right? Well, I implemented the rack and pressing into my game because it actually makes it more realistic. Yes, it's brutal. The rack has killed people because they're so desperate to get the information. The rack is stretching people out. Well, you break their back and all that, and it can kill them. So it's been incorporated. If you are wanting to do a more brutal game, I say go for it. Because the history of humanity is full of very vile things. One of the other skills I put in here is drowning. And yes, it's in history. People have been drowned. Back in the witch trial time period, they had trials by ordeal where people were put on this basket tied it to a basket and submerged underwater. And if they lived, it was viewed as God was wanting them to be punished because God saved their life. So either way, if you were accused of witchcraft back then, you were dead. Either way. And so this is unfortunately a way for people to die. And so it's been incorporated. You have to, if you want a realistic game, you have to think of all the possibilities. Like I've said, I've been role-playing for over 30 years. And so I have had situations where, I could have easily resolved a conflict, a situation, by using some of these more, what many people call darker concepts. But that was what the group that I was in was willing to do. But Rolemaster, and I bet many other games, don't have anything set up to resolve that. I've been doing a lot of research and hearing a lot of stories about how killing the PC is somehow a bad thing. And a lot of the D&D and clone systems, there are so many life-saving throws, and it kind of makes it unrealistic to me. Because, your PC is going into life-threatening situations, but hey, if he makes one of 20 rolls, he still lives. No. The mortality rate back then was high because people died from a lot of things. We had diseases, poisons, war, bad health. And so we cannot just put in there so many things that's going to prevent death in a genre that a lot of people died. I mean, that just to me is unrealistic. You want immersion, so then you got to make it realistic, right? And sad to say, for many people that aren't going to be able to handle it, your role playing and your character can die. So sometimes they have to die. 1 second. My morning tea. So, if you are designing your game, you need to reflect back on how violent, how dark you are going to allow things to get. If you are having undead and vampires and all that, that's brutal. Werewolves. How do people become werewolves? They get attacked. And so violence is a part of the game. So you do need to consider, how many ways a person could die in history, and then put that into your fantasy role-playing game. The last attack table that I'm going to be adding to my game, I'm still trying to figure out all the dynamics of it because it's disease. A lot of people died during the Black Death. Historically correct. And if you can't handle history, you're in the wrong game. But historically correct, the Black Plague went through and killed a quarter of the population and more in certain areas in Europe. And so I am trying to figure out, how do I handle disease? Currently the theory for me is they do a resistance roll against the disease. As long as they make their resistance rolls, they're good. But once they fail a resistance roll, Then they have to go against the disease. The disease is now internal, so armor types don't mean anything. And you got to figure out how long the period of effect is, and either every hour or every half hour they take a disease attack roll until they make I missed a step. They have to do another resistance roll, and if they fail that resistance roll, they have to do a disease attack roll to see how much damage it would take. Now, certain diseases are more dangerous than others, obviously, because, oh no, he's got the common cold. No big deal in most cases. People do die from the cold and flu still. And so we need to have it where that could possibly happen. And then you have other diseases, like I mentioned, the Black Death, where it is more aggressive. And so you can have it where, they fail a couple resistance rolls, and that was a pretty strong attack because the plague is violent. It has been recorded to kill a lot of people and quickly. And so they have to do these resistance rolls for maybe like 3 days, every hour for 3 days, to see if they live. Yes, it would be a time-consuming thing to do, but I think for the immersion and for the reality, because you do want to have some structures that are more historically correct in the game, to see if that character or characters, if they live or die. So I'm going to end my video here. What is your viewpoint on having all these extra points? And I just remembered the other thing I wanted to talk about. Sexually attacking somebody, what the real word is that YouTube hates. That is a very morbid thing, right? But I added it technically to the game. I added the skill of sex into my list of athletic skills because it is a very physical thing. Seduction is getting somebody to have sex with you, but it's not the actual act. And I felt that thus we need to have that actual skill in the game, because it makes, in my game system, characters have to develop that skill too. Okay? And so if you are having a dancer, an entertainer, a dervish, in your game where they use sexuality as to achieve things, should they not have that skill? And it's a fantasy world, and so there's going to be some very morally wrong things that are going to happen in the game. But it's a game, it's a fantasy, it's not reality. And so sometimes consent is just presentism. Yes, we are going to wish that everything was a little bit more sunshine and rainbows, but unfortunately, in reality, current day, we have that problem, and it was just as bad back then. If you are going to be a game designer and or a GM, are you going to allow those things to occur in your game? And if so, you need to apply them and get them figured out in your game. Yes, in your initial meeting with potential players, let them know the brutality level in your games. Let them know that there is a chance that, this could happen or that could happen. And if they don't want to play, then don't let them play. Because, this is your game and you should be able to do as you want. And, If you are going to nerf your game because of this person over here, is that going to take away from the game? I mean, you're not going to have yourself a murdering, murder hobo type game, but what if you have a character that's secretly a murderer? You know, what happens if somebody got drunk and got seduced and all that? There are so many things that can happen that could be taken as good and evil, and we have to figure out, are we going to allow this in our game? So that is something for a lot of you to think about. True, not a lot of people are going to be able to handle the game such as mine because I have these things in it. But it does not mean that I'm going to be using it every campaign. You know, some skills might be only used every once in a great while, but I am happy knowing that they're there if needed. Okay? Better to have something and never use it than to need it and not have it. So everybody please take care. Be at peace.